Occult Confessions is brought to you commercial-free through the generous support of our patrons. Visit occultconfessions.com and click on Donate to help keep the history of the occult on the digital airwaves. Synanon is really two different organizations separated by time with the same origin and some of the same personnel, sort of like 1960s Jefferson Airplane and 1980s Starship. One has very little to do with the other close-up, but from a far enough distance, they look kind of similar. The psychologist Stephen Simon calls these two groups Synanon I and Synanon II. Synanon I called itself a charitable organization and focused its energies on drug rehabilitation in the inner city. Synanon II called itself a religion and established communes in urban and rural locations where residents followed whatever rules were passed down as part of the Synanon leadership's social experiment. Synanon I saved lives, even though it was often protested by NIMBY neighbors who didn't want to run into recovering drug addicts at the grocery store. Synanon II accumulated vast resources and sought to intentionally freak out the general public, leading to the group's decline. My name is Dr. Rob C. Thompson. I am the Supreme Hierophant of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors, welcoming you to this episode of Occult Confessions, where I am joined by Jake Wheatley and Nikki Hiller-Henderson, who are Synanon I and Synanon II, but I'll let them work out which one is which. Jake, Nikki?
Wait, which part am I in Synanon 1 or Synanon 2?
I want that number one spot.
All right.
I'm sorry, Jake.
Fair enough. You want me to be the religious cult? Hey,
you have enough, as in
no, it's fine.
More than enough.
I think I have enough experience with religious cults. Oh, that's probably not the best thing to say.
We, the members of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors, do solemnly commit ourselves to a full and honest telling of the history of the occult as far as we know it.
All right, Jake, let's open up that order of confessors. Any sound that amuses you?
Wazoo.
Or a word. Okay. We want to welcome to our patron community Dave B, Mind for Chaos, and Marlon A. And thanks Suits and Julie K for the pledge bump. Thanks, you guys. We want to let you know over on Patreon, we got a few things going on. I've been dropping some special scholarly articles that are not out there in the wide world of scholarship. These are conference papers that I have put together just for our patron audience. Take a look at the scholarship if you are interested. And if that sounds boring, we are also doing some bonus podcast episodes. We're going to be doing the rest of my series on death on stage. We're going to do comedians and musicians over on the Patreon. And we just dropped a brown one in math during our Druid series, which is an extension of the 4 tales of the Mabinogion. So head on over there. For as little as $2 a month, you too could be enjoying all that bonus content. All right, let's close it up, Nikki.
Woohoo!
Similar but different.
It was in theme.
Yes, on topic. All right, to Synanon, friends. This was a topic that was requested of us. Jake tells me that it has recently become the topic of a documentary, but we'll try and add our own spin on it. Both Synanons.
We'll do it better.
We'll do it better. I mean, I didn't want to say that, but you can say that.
Oh, I'll say it. We're going to do it better, and everyone knew it. So
and
you're welcome.
Yours, I mean ours, you can listen to while cooking or driving, but not the documentary. You got to actually sit and watch it. What a pain.
Right, multitasking is where it's at. We're here to help you get through the chores you don't want to do.
There you go. Weld away, my welders. Both Synanons were led by Chuck Dederich, or Dieterich. Let's go with Dieterich. When Dieterich came to lead Synanon, he had been an alcoholic for 20 years and had trouble maintaining a relationship or holding down a job. Does this sound familiar to either of you?
Yeah.
Too close to home already, huh?
I was pretty
triggered.
functioning.
That's all right.
I was pretty functioning.
You had a lot of relationships, Nikki, as I recall.
And a lot of jobs, just not for a long time.
Yeah. But was alcohol your primary issue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some more.
You've said so on the show.
Illicit,
I'm not.
Yeah, and some more illicit substances.
Okay. Well, we'll get into those too. He joined Alcoholics Anonymous, Chuck that is, but decided it was too limiting. As the social science professor Louis Jablonski, who worked very closely with Dieterich and wrote one of the first books about Synanon, said, quote, "It seems that any approach not completely developed by Chuck himself was too binding for his roaring ego needs."
Hey, I've been told that too. Most things are too binding for me for my roaring ego needs.
When I'm citing Jablonski, I also want to say he likes Dieterich, but that's how he characterized it.
He's here for it. He's like, I love the drama, but it's drama.
Love the roaring ego, yeah. In the winter of 1958, at his apartment in Ocean Beach, California, he set up what he called free association discussion groups with some friends from AA.
I could detect considerable lying and self-deception in the group. I began to attack viciously, partly out of my own irritations and at times to defend myself. The group would join in and we would let the air out of pompously inflated egos, including my own. The sessions soon became the high point of everybody's week. The early sessions were focused around sexual problems. Some of the group had analytic couch work. As a result of these vicious haircuts, people seemed to grow before my eyes.
Basically saying he can detect when people are lying and he's getting them to like confront each other about their lies.
So he just has really good intuition.
Yeah, he's good at reading people, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, anybody who's going to end up leading a cult is going to be good at reading people.
That's true.
Right? You got those people skills, but you're taking them to a dark place. Some of us with people
subjective,
skills.
But
okay.
If you can get a following, it's fine.
Some of us run a theater and a podcast. Others, this stuff.
Not getting away from those allegations, but
who can?
Nope.
This was the beginning and the core of the Synanon experience, and it was so throughout all of Synanon. But this idea of the group getting together and calling each other out on their BS, that's it. That's sort of what it's all about. But it morphs. Everything around it morphs and changes.
I was going to say that could be good,
No.
but it also sounds like in cults when they'll sit around in groups and berate people for their mistakes or shortcomings. So like it could be constructive criticism, but I could see it easily slipping into a more dark psychological manipulation.
Let's see if you can feel when the line gets crossed here.
Spoiler, the line gets
Dang
crossed.
In the early days, it was called the Synanon, and of these group meetings, they were called the Synanons. So there's capital S Synanon, and that's the whole group, and they do little s Synanon meetings where they get together and talk about their BS. It was also called haircutting. You're giving me a haircut, or I'm giving you a haircut when I'm telling you to get over your crap.
You're like exposing them? Is that like or getting down to the root? Maybe.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Taking a little off the top, taking that ego edge off the top.
Critical thinking.
Over time, it came to be called The Game. The group of 7 men and 6 women began to regard Dieterich as their leader, and Dieterich believed that these Synanon sessions, which were, as I say, an aggressive kind of group work, were a new form of therapy.
I found the line getting crossed. Aggressive.
Well, I mean, it was always aggressive. Then one of the members brought an addict called Whitey to the group, and Whitey.
Okay.
Dieterich gave the man a real blast.
Oh.
By that, I don't mean like a good party. I mean like he blasted him with
that doesn't sound good.
Some truth. He hit him with the hard truth about Whitey's BS. And he says, Dieterich said that caused a positive father transference, and Whitey got clean.
He just had daddy issues. And then he solved them, and now he's good.
Yeah, it's Dieterich is intentionally doing what I sometimes accidentally do with my students. He's replacing bad fathers.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, I did not say that. I that one slipped out. I love them.
Yeah, I mean, his theory is that most addicts, or comes to be, like over time as he collects these people, he comes to believe that most addicts have bad father figures. And so he fills in for that father figure and corrects the imbalance.
Well, I mean, I guess like therapy sessions that I've been in, they say everything like it stems from somewhere. So I guess he just was just like, oh, you have family issues.
I mean, and if we think in like 1950s terms, 1960s
Who doesn't have
terms,
family issues at that point, especially?
That's fair.
but it also, dad is discipline, right? Dad is order, mom is nurture. So if you have Dietrich is trying to fill in for that discipline by saying, get straight, here's what's wrong with you. Your dad should have told you this, that you can't just lay around all day and, I don't know, freebase heroin. Dad should have pointed that out.
Thanks,
Dang
Dad.
it. If only he hadn't died when I was so young before he could warn me not to freebase.
I would say it was around that time in July that I knew it was possible to clean up a dope fiend. I knew that Whitey had been clean for maybe about 4 months, and it was made possible by the emotional talks and, secondarily, by screaming in catharsis-type synonyms.
Dietrich rented a storefront building and started doing sessions 3 times a week. So now he's running like a little mom-and-pop therapy shop. Then came Jesse, the first formal commitment to Synanon, having been persuaded to quit his job and move into the building. So he's got a storefront, like a deli, and he has a kid move into it.
Okay, I think that's the line.
Is there like an apartment?
That seems to be the line, when it's no longer just an external group and you're taking these people in like a you live with me sense. That's a little...
I'll devil's advocate you here, Nikki. I mean, that's rehab too, though, isn't it?
Halfway houses.
Halfway house. He's
but
just
there's
one guy
usually
in
a group of people in charge,
deli.
is there not? It's not just one guy you go live with, this one guy to get sober. It's supposed to be like people to help you.
It is an organization. It's a small organization, but I would say at this point there's maybe like 20, 30 people involved. And Dietrich is, the head. Like you got a president at a college or something, but all these people are on the same idea.
Okay.
So not a cult. You want it to be a cult, but it's not a cult yet.
Okay. I'm suspicious. My cult meter is going up.
Nikki's going to grab that line and keep moving it. When Jesse got clean and stayed clean, his story was printed in the paper 13 months later, and his parole officer became Synanon's first professional contact, who began sending drug addicts to Synanon.
Positive.
Yeah, it's all right. There had been considerable overlap between Dietrich's Alcoholics Anonymous friends and the new crew of narcotics addicts in year 1, because he started with AA guys. And then all these narcotics addicts, heroin, whatever, cocaine, these guys are starting to get in the
Probably
mix.
because they didn't fit into the AA box.
Right. Didn't quite fit. But the addicts don't mesh. This was news to me. They struggle to get along.
Different personalities.
Dietrich began talking about his LSD experience, which didn't sit well with the recovering alcoholics, so Synanon made a split with AA completely and never looked back.
We were building something new and different. Although I will always be grateful to AA for helping me personally, Synanon has nothing to do with AA any more than a rowboat compares with an airplane. We have a live-in situation with family characteristics. We emphasize self-reliance rather than dependence on a higher being.
I think what Brandon is saying, what Dietrich is saying here is that Synanon is all about self-reliance and AA is about dependence on a higher being, and that's an important ideological difference. I think with, as far as the alcoholics and the narcotics addicts go, alcoholics, maybe they think of themselves as better because their drug is going to kill them slower.
It's a social acceptance thing. It is socially acceptable to drink, and there's tons of places you can do it. You can do it socially. You can't do drugs like that. And with a small group of people, sure, but like you can't go to a party and openly do cocaine on a countertop. Depends on the party, okay? But like just an average bar. You can't walk into a bar and do cocaine on the counter in an average bar. You're get arrested. But you can walk in and do 12 shots of tequila.
And when we're talking about heroin, you're not really partying much.
Well, no. And so stuff like that. And also it's just not as woo, let's all go out and do this together. Like, there's so much social pressure around drinking.
Cocaine happens in the bathroom, drinking can happen out at the bar.
Exactly.
Yablonsky called Synanon's live-in family structure similar in some areas to a primitive tribal structure, which seems to affect individuals on a subconscious level. The structure was autocratic. Dietrich's dad, his future wife Betty, who was the first African-American woman to join Synanon, described it like this.
When I walked into the club, I walked into the midst of a big father transference. Everybody seemed to be having it. This man was God up there. They would anxiously wait to hear what the old man had to say. If it came from him, that's the way it was. They would actually quote things that Chuck would say.
So at this point, he's a very powerful figure among this small group of drug addicts.
He's like that inspirational that they're starting to write down his quotes or like stitch them into things.
Pillows.
In my mind, you always have to be careful of people who put themselves in position of power over vulnerable people in a way that you're like, I'm helping, you know, like, yes, you can be helping, but it's also, if the wrong type of person gets into that position, that kind of power kind of gets to your head because you have power over these people, and wrong kind of person.
Sure.
Especially like people who in this situation, they're craving or they have like that dependency on something that it's just kind of like switching to another thing that they're getting a quote unquote like fix in a way out of it. Not the same level, obviously, but
if you depend on it, Who are you in it for? Are you in it for the people you're serving, or are you in it for yourself? I mean, like the trope of the prison warden that Nikki's talking about, or the trope of the, shrink at the asylum where it just goes too far. But has it gone too far? I haven't seen yet. Nikki thinks it went too far, like on day one.
I was so suspicious from the start.
Okay, but now here's the thing. Dietrich was aware that people were developing this attachment, and in the early days, he sought to break it through something he called the Synathon. This was a 21-hour session, followed by a 17-hour session, during which he worked to snap the emotional bond, and this apparently worked for a lot of people they were able to just, like, move on.
By spending that much time together, it seems a little counterintuitive. Let's spend over 24 hours together. Maybe it's so they're sick of him. They just get so sick of him, they never want to see his face again, and that's how he did it.
When dad makes you smoke all those cigarettes,
I will say on like a different level, getting like sent away to something and being forced to spend time with other like-minded people doesn't exactly work.
Well, I mean, a lot of people were voluntary, Jake, but yes, some, the parole officer or whatever, like they were voluntary, but it was like the alternative was jail, or the alternative was, a program they didn't want to be a part of. So you got to pick it.
That's fair.
But yeah. He also sought to raise members up through the ranks to the level of director to assist in the hierarchical control of the group. So he was on the top, but he was trying to get the addicts to become functional members of the running of the place.
Is he starting an MLM?
Older members had freer
spoilers
had freer access to goods than younger members, which further established this hierarchy. So if you've been there for a while, you get better stuff. Because the group lived on donated items. They didn't buy anything. They had no money. With no one in Synanon collecting any paycheck, including Dietrich, in the Synanon I period. So food banks and stuff, they would drop food off because they're basically like a halfway house, taking care of extremely poor people off the street who have serious addiction issues that landed them on the street in the first place.
How did he afford the building in the first place then?
Donations.
Did he have a job? Oh, it was just through donations?
He developed... People got very interested in the social experiment and the idea that he was successful. Like these first couple guys, Whitey and Jesse, like the stories start to spread, and people in the community who are interested in solving the drug problem invest in him to see where it goes. Members had to perform tasks to serve the group, like cooking, cleaning, and shopping. So they became like a commune. They're self-sufficient. So you're an addict, you're going to these Synanons, and you're running the kitchen. During non-game hours, members were allowed to talk back to the leadership, but they were also expected to comply with any requests made of them. They were instructed to read from the classics, according to Dieterich, which not a bad list. It included Emerson, Thoreau, the Gospels, Lao Tzu, Buddhist scriptures. So religiously pluralistic, but also a lot of that self-reliance with Thoreau and Emerson, right? And it's all about building up yourself to be able to deal with your shit. Dieterich formalized the Synanon structures by setting the groups at 3 men and 3 women with a synonist, which is to say...
He's just coming up with new ways to riff off of this
He's
word.
like, I only got the one word. That's all I could come up with.
Sinusitis. A synonist.
Sounds like a sinus infection.
It is, yeah, it is.
They call their colds.
So 3 men, 3 women, plus a synonist. The synonist is a recovering addictive personality who has kicked their addiction, and that's the leader of this group. So now the sessions are becoming formalized in their structure. The Synanons, or games, were focused on detecting and overcoming members' attempts to consciously or subconsciously evade the truth about themselves and their habits. Ridicule, cross-examination, and verbal attack led to an emotional catharsis that was all left in the room and in the exercise. So let's bear in mind, Nikki's already she's looking for that line. This is all addict on addict activity. Dieterich is good at this and he frequently participates, but there are so many meetings happening every day that this will happen without him ever being present.
So it's not just him berating individual people. It's like self-on-self criticism. Nope. Okay, I'm backing up from the line a little bit.
I mean, if it was just Dieterich, then that's like pure cult from day one. But it's spread out across the group and everyone is doing it to everybody else, including him. He got gamed. People gamed him. By backing the play, group members could work together to pile on to somebody who was resisting seeing through their defenses. In the bounds of the ritual, you could say anything, no matter how caustic or mean. But after the ritual was over, you left it behind, you shook hands, you shared coffee with the guy you were screaming at minutes before.
This is like, again, back to the similar situation when going into like conversion therapy. One of the things that we did was we did like a little bit like this, but then also a little bit of like role playing our lives, and then people had like free reign to say that kind of like anything in context. It's wild, but then you go back and it's just everyone's chill. So
I would not be good at that. I would be glaring daggers at everybody over my coffee. I'd be like, I remember what you said. I remember what you said. Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah.
The compartmentalizing is part of the critique of it. Like, it is hard to do, but pulling it off theoretically helped some of these people to put their, to deal with it and then let it go.
It's like extreme, just like yelling at each other.
Struggle sessions, yeah.
Yeah.
The exercise demonstrated that members believed each other capable of change and worthy of the trouble. I mean, I like that.
That's sweet.
I mean, that's the good dad part of it, right? It's that old argument, like in a relationship, when you stop fighting, you stop caring. I've always argued with my romantic partners. It's something I enjoy practically. But if you, I always say from day one, when I stop arguing with you, I stop caring what you think, and I stop being interested in either of us changing to make this work.
There is a certain amount of passion that has to be behind arguing, because if you don't feel passionate about something, you're just, why bother?
Right.
You're not giving the effort there.
It's not good to be arguing all the time, but it's also not good to never be arguing. I think that's bad for human beings. I also like to make sure that, and maybe people will write in that I'm a terrible parent, but I don't... it's okay to disagree with my wife in front of my children sometimes, and for them to see us work out the problem. Now, we don't throw things at each other and break plates. That's not okay. But the disagreement and two adults trying to reach a compromise, I think it's an important thing to model.
That's really healthy.
Otherwise,
for them, because
you're afraid of conflict.
Yeah, you have to. It's something you're going to have to face. I know. I hate conflict. My mom hated conflict. Right. Everybody in my family hates conflict.
See, mine loved it. I did not. Polar.
Yeah, you have to model it in the right way. It has to be a constructive thing. But that's tough to do because you're disagreeing. I can't say that Katie and I are angels and we're perfect at this, but I do insist that the kids see us disagree sometimes.
Like it's good of like showing that side of like, yeah, arguments and stuff happen, but then also showing the other side of it, of like coming out of the argument to show like where compromise or like peace was made as well.
That's what holds it together.
Yeah.
If a member's defenses were able to survive a Synanon game, this indicated that these were probably valid defenses and not lies the person was telling themselves. So if you're like, I'm not a selfish prick, my mother abused me. And then, but then the people are like, no, she didn't abuse you. You're a selfish prick because you are hoarding Ritz crackers in the drawers or something. And they keep yelling at you and they're talking about all the things you do to make you selfish. And you keep going, no, it's my mother. Then the Synanon session is over. They're like, oh, that's too bad about your mother.
Maybe it was your mom, actually. That's rough.
Yeah. Because if they can't poke holes in it and push through it, then it's real. And then it becomes part of how the group understands you. Although the animosity was left in the exercise, whatever the group discovered was not. Unlike standard group therapy, there was no expectation of privacy or privilege. This is not like regular group therapy. Personal details were freely shared so that everybody knew everybody else's hang-ups and evasive techniques and could game them as the session's members were changing. So you also weren't going to the same group therapy session every time. The membership changed, but everybody talked about everybody else's stuff so that you could get game properly. Yeah, you're laid bare. You're stripped bare.
It's a little bit like
parading around.
Write down a list
naked,
of all your worst secrets, and we'll just hold on to those.
Yeah. By June 1959, the group was 40 people large and had to move from the storefront into a rundown building. But now we have beds.
Leveling up.
The next month, an important event in the group's early history took place. This was afterwards called the Big Cop Out. This is when everyone copped to their own guilt. We're using a lot of 60s slang here, I know. It's late 50s, 60s slang. This is the old school stuff. This is before we were saying groovy and stuff. And man, while there was a couple of versions of how the cop-out began, it was by all accounts impromptu, improvised, off the cuff. One of the residents had gotten high and was brought back to his dorm, where everyone started to game him, yelling and drawing a crowd until everybody in the whole building was gathered in this one dorm room. After some pressure, this resident, who had been outright refusing to admit that he was high, copped to having used drugs.
The worst high of their life. Just like everyone, like 40 people, you're high. Yeah.
That is a bad trip, man.
Thank you.
Synanon director Charlie Hamer said that this came at the end of others copping to their own drug use since joining Synanon. But Dieterich said it happened afterwards. In any case, everybody started confessing to sneaking pills, sneaking cough syrup, sneaking dope, and they all ratted each other out as Dieterich and the other directors pressed to hear, who'd you get high with? Someone's like, oh, damn it, I got high. Well, who'd you get high with? John. And John's like, no, I didn't. And they're like, but John, Phil just said you did. And he's like, yeah, okay, fine. We got this cough syrup. And everyone, except for a single woman named Arlene, admitted to some form of cheating. Arlene was the only truly clean person at Synanon.
Damn. She looks around. She's like, really? I'm the only one putting in the work?
I don't know if it's the pride or if you're just like, oh, man, what am I doing here?
No one was taking this seriously. Okay.
You feel like a fool.
You guys have been on drugs this whole time?
I should have been doing it too. I could have gotten away with it.
But this was a turning point because the Big Cop-Out, which was a kind of bonding experience for everybody involved, had brought Synanon to a point where guilt could force honesty. And their purpose became sharper and more focused. Do you see? So now everyone, no, they're not being purists. They're not absolutely abstaining. But now they're being honest with themselves and each other about the cheating. So it's not feeding more guilt and making it worse and worse, a vicious cycle.
So were they just like, they just got really scared that it would happen to them too? Or it's just that much of like community formed that they were like, you know what? No, I did too. It's like they're like slowly
That's
standing
how
up.
I'm picturing it. I did drugs. I did
One or the
drugs.
other.
I did
I did
drugs.
too.
I think it's a bit of each. Yeah, I imagine that confessing was part of like encouraging that poor guy who got piled on, but then it's also about, yes, everyone's standing up, and then you don't want to be the one who did do it, but missed this one opportunity to confess it when everybody else is. Yeah.
That another like memory that I'm like picking up again is like sitting in church. It's one of those moments of like, they're like, okay, you stand up, like people start like confessing, and then like slowly everyone else does, because I remember like sitting in that, just kind of like piecing together like how these people might have felt. It's like, oh, you are like, you might miss your chance here. It's like a feel good that you're kind of like getting off of this too.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
All right, let's hear from Charlie Hamer. So Jake's going to give us a little bit of Charlie Hamer's perspective. He was an early Synanon member and, as I said, became a director.
Each night, Chuck would come and shake hands with me. Every night he'd say, I'll say goodbye tonight because you won't be here in the morning. And in the morning he'd say, well damn, are you still here? This presented some sort of a challenge, and I believe now it kept me here. Nothing else might have worked. This big, hairy, uncouth-looking individual with a hole in the side of his head was the main thing that kept me here. Him and the 2 girls babying me those 3 days or so. They stayed up with me and never let me alone for a moment. That combination did the impossible.
I mean, it sounds all right there, doesn't it?
It's like a little inspirational.
Yeah, Chuck is, being dad, but he's not like, oh, you can't leave, I'm going to hold you here. He's like, man, you probably aren't going to be here, but it'd be nice if you were. Right? And these girls are helping they'll hold you up while you're vomiting and sweating and shaking.
It's like people loving you at your lowest moment there.
Yeah.
It's like, we still care about you.
Complete strangers.
Yeah.
There's good Christianity right there. Hamer went on to become a director, as I said, which was a remarkable transformation. He went from being, hopelessly addicted on the streets, poor, living from, hit to hit, and now he's a director at this drug treatment program. Monica, a former prostitute who had been neglected by her parents as a child and took up heroin at the age of 16, said, and we'll get Nikki to do this one,
I was a bad whore. I hated what I had to do. I could only turn a trick if I was heavily loaded. I always fixed before I turned a trick because I was unreliable. My business began to fall off. I wound up in Los Angeles as a common street hype, doing what I had to do. For about a year, I made this horrible scene. It was like a nightmare. Finally, I got sent to the Terminal Island prison for a year. When I got out of there, I naturally went back to the streets. It was the only life I knew. I was desperately trying to quit. One day, I heard about Synanon from a connection. Somehow I got down there, and that was it. I've been clean since 1959 because of Synanon. The main thing I was given there was a new direction.
Yeah, how about all that 50 slang? Turning the tricks and stuff. Do we say any of this stuff anymore? Get loaded? Do we still say get loaded?
I don't think so. A trick, sure.
Getting loaded, I've heard people refer to it as just like getting really drunk, like getting tanked.
Yeah. Yeah. Some things stayed. Same old scene. The word scene, that's still with us, kind of. That made it through the 80s. Anyhow, Synanon moved to Santa Monica when the building was condemned that they were in.
Where are they off to next?
They were at the time of the move the largest collection of abstaining drug addicts living behind open doors, in Detterich's words.
Maybe the only one.
But the neighbors wanted them out. Yeah, I mean, it's an unusual concept at this point in time. The neighbors did not want them in Santa Monica. There were a series of city council hearings on the topic, culminating with the city demanding that they vacate the building by the 10th of May, 1960. But Synanon contested the order, and at the subsequent hearing, Dr. Bernard Brandschaft testified that Synanon was successfully treating the heretofore incurable disease of drug addiction. Dieterich was forced to spend 25 days in jail, get this, for a zoning violation. This was a very unusual penalty for the offense. And The group agreed to relocate. I had trouble with zoning. When I established my first theater in New Jersey, I had to move, but I did not spend any time in jail.
Good job.
Something to brag about.
Yeah.
But I mean, the point I'm trying to make here is the city of Santa Monica and maybe the county, I don't know, the state wanted to send a message, at least to the residents, that they were taking this very seriously, because it was bad politics in a way. I mean, they're dealing with these upper middle class people who don't want the drug addicts in their neighborhood. And I'm talking like, you know, we have those school board meetings in America now where people go and yell about, you know, the gays and stuff.
Don't teach my kids sexual education.
You know, all that stuff. This was happening over Synanon in Santa Monica. People didn't want them in that community that badly. They really didn't want this house.
That's crazy.
So that's how he ended up in jail. But the judges and stuff were like, oh man, we got to give these people something because they're mad and they you know, pay our salaries and stuff. But you guys are really doing a cool thing. So we're sorry about this, but
there's just a way to like appease them for the time being.
Honestly, yeah. Despite neighbors' concerns, both the state and local government began to look at and speak approvingly of Synanon. Senator Thomas Dodd, head of a subcommittee on juvenile delinquency, wrote that Synanon was a man-made miracle that could help thousands of drug addicts. Integration was an important theme of these early years as well, and it became increasingly abstract and conceptual as we moved from Synanon I to Synanon II, but at the beginning, integration is exactly what it sounds like. Dietrich's commitment to racial integration was deep and it was genuine. There were no racial barriers to joining Synanon, and by 1965, 3 of Dietrich's directors, including his wife Betty, were black.
Okay.
This, I think, was another neighborhood issue.
Oh, yeah. The racists.
Not only do you have...
too progressive.
I'll tolerate the drug addicts, but not the black people. Oh, no.
Right. We have recovering black drug addicts, recovering white drug addicts, all living in the same house in your Santa Monica neighborhood.
I mean, good for him. I'll give him that. I'll give him a point on the good scale for at least not being racist.
Not turning anyone away.
And the game, you know, the little sessions confronted prejudice directly and sought to create a harmonious colorblind order. So if you had prejudice, you were called out on your prejudice. Or if you were hiding behind, you know, some sort of racial thing, you were called out for that, playing the race card, whatever. Like all that was put on the table and dealt with in these matches.
Let's get
women's rights and issues. Yeah, right. Women's rights and issues were protected by a women's council, consisting entirely of women, who also oversaw the reuniting of addict mothers with their children.
Oh, okay. Whoa. That's lovely.
Getting addict mothers to confront their failures as parents, failures which they often fought to ignore, was an important part of their recovery. Think about the addict mother. I mean, basically the situation was that these women would come in and they would say, you know, I'm an addict and, you know, it's terrible, but I'm a good mother. And Synanon would say, no, you're not. You are not a good mother. You are a terrible mother. And they would get them to confront the fact that their habit was terrible for their child. It was ruining their child's life. And but they needed to have that discovery was the idea. And the women's councils would help them reach this. Then they could heal. Integration also extended to non-addicts, or squares, as non-addicts were called.
You fucking squares.
Losers.
It's hip to be square, man. It's hip to be square.
Nah. Squares.
In the Synanon context, square wasn't really necessarily a bad thing, because square meant, I mean, we think about it as like not cool, right? The squares. But it was more like straight edge. What we think about is the straight edge community in the 90s and the 2000s.
Fair enough, I guess.
Because they were advocates for Synanon. So you wouldn't be a square if you were just some asshole at a town council meeting. You were labeled a square, and you got to be part of the community of squares when you were attending Synanon meetings. So let me tell you about this.
I was just going to say, so you're an ally.
Yeah.
Ally.
Yeah, exactly right. You would join Synanon Saturday night meetings. Squares were often advocates of Dietrich's program, with as many as 200 visiting Synanon for a Saturday gathering. So on Saturday nights, squares could come and hang out with the addicts and do the game. They could play the game. That really bumped their numbers out. Dietrich's theory was that if recovering addicts could integrate with squares and come to understand the square world, then they could come to live in it, and they could graduate from Synanon. You had to get integrated by exposure to people who weren't addicts.
These aren't like... I know it's going down a bad route, but like some of these things aren't bad.
Yeah, they're not bad ideas.
It's progressive.
For the time, like, my gosh, yeah.
Like, yeah, you're bringing like more like positive influences around to kind of just demonstrate, be role models. It's just, it feels like it's about to go downhill.
We are very close. Integration was further celebrated and practiced with the hoopla dance, in which a large group of dancers moved together in a small space, each doing their own thing, but somehow syncing up and flowing together.
Sounds like some of our acting session.
Yeah. I was like, whoa.
Whoa, wait a second.
Did some theater kids get mixed in there? What happened there?
There must have been.
But so ends... This is the end of our conversation about Synanon I, and we will now begin the transition into Synanon II. So in my opinion, we haven't crossed the line yet. We're still doing okay. But Nikki's pulled that line out a couple times, so we'll see if we see it again.
They always say the sequel is the worst.
Ghostbusters, that didn't work out, did it? I didn't mind the second one. The Statue of Liberty was kind of cool, walking around and stuff. The slime was a little scary. Anyhow, Mad Max 2 was supposed to be good. I haven't seen Mad Max 2.
Yeah, I love Anya Taylor-Joy.
In fits and starts, the miracle utopia of Synanon I metamorphosed into the strange dystopia of Synanon II. The organization began recording, and by the way, this is scholars after the fact labeling them 1 and 2. They never saw a line between it. The line
they didn't
never
label
existed.
Themselves.
No. It just kept changing until it got to this place. The organization began recording its meetings as a means to achieve better transparency and for therapeutic analysis. Now, that's fine in theory. Games began to be played in front of live audiences, so surveillance is becoming a little bit more robust.
Oh.
And then some of the recordings took on the dimension of scripture, as several of Dietrich's addresses during meetings were copied onto tapes and distributed and listened to over and over by members. This wasn't a top-down thing. The members themselves, because they were, deifying him or fatherifying him, got really hung up on these particular speeches he would give in some of these meetings. The group considered but didn't go through with experimentation with hallucinogens and began using the Ouija board in its Jungian context as a way to channel group consciousness.
So you hallucinogens like drugs?
LSD, probably, is my guess.
Isn't that the kind of counteractive to what they were trying to fix?
I think Dietrich's idea is like this common idea of like using it for PTSD or something, that it can be used to treat the psychological problem that is the root of the addiction issue.
I've always been so scared about
So
LSD.
I see the logic.
I have such bad anxiety. I just don't even need to know what. No. I like to trust what I can see. If I couldn't, I don't know about that. I've heard of people like not being able to come back properly from like a bad acid trip. And I'm like, I don't know, that could be me. We're never going to try.
You got too much anxiety, man. Squares, specifically progressive white squares, were increasingly invited into the fold through game clubs that could attract up to 200 members and ask the participants give as little as $1 and as much as they could afford to attend. The progressive white squares are important because this is the hippie culture, right? It's starting to blend up with the hippie culture. The hippies we sort of like forget this about them. Yes, they were dirty and naked, but they were also, and hairy, and that's all fine.
Hey now.
But they...
2 of my 3 favorite things.
Right. It's all good. However, they were upper middle class college kids, by and large. At first, anyway. That's who got the movement going, was upper middle class college kids protesting. We could think about today's protesters, who are all generally at elite colleges. They're the ones doing the protesting. They're not all white anymore, but they are all upper middle class, or heading in that direction. They will end up in the elite.
It's easier to have a voice when you have less to like Yeah, and a safety net underneath you.
There's a lot of interesting arguing over it. I mean, there's also the like guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I can't call it white guilt because it's, again, not just white people.
Middle
the Obamas
class guilt.
are elite,
Upper middle
right?
class guilt.
It's elite guilt, yeah, about the fact that, you know, these groups that are disempowered, and you theoretically have these progressive ideals, and yet you live in a
world where it's not reflected. Yes.
Right. You never have to encounter these people. Yeah. So these squares are trying to correct this through their engagements with Synanon. Yablonsky, who sent his students to Saturday night meetings at Synanon, my guy who wrote the first book on Synanon, as an assignment in the early 60s, observed how some students left feeling jealous of the closeness and familial spirit at Synanon. So like, oh, I wish I had friends like these drug addict guys. In 1968, some of these squares became what were called lifestylers. Now, okay. At first, these lifestylers gave most of their money to Synanon and participated in most activities, but didn't live there. Then in 1969, they were asked to all move into the commune, and they were gamed if they resisted.
They were like,
ding, 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 ding. I found the line.
This is the line, yeah.
That is manipulation, coercion. The recording of the sessions could be called blackmail.
So maybe this is where you were going, Jake, but the idea was if I was like, okay, it's time, Jake. I know that you're straight and all, but drug-wise,
50%.
You are drug straight. But you know, you've been like donating a lot of your money to the place, and you're living the Synanon lifestyle. It's time to move in. You're like, Rob, I don't really want to. I got my own place. It's real nice. And then I'm like, okay, guys, get him. He's got some issues, there's some blockages in his head that he needs to get over.
He's not fessing up,
right,
to conform.
You clearly have more work to do that you're hiding from, Jake. Get in the house right now. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm joking.
The logic is strained here because it makes sense for an addict to live in a rehab style situation where they can't just wander around and do whatever they want.
Well, because when you're not being observed, that's when you're left, like you said, wander.
It makes less sense when you were never addicted to anything in the first place.
Now you're just involuntary, almost prison, but not, but kind of.
It's becoming more like a controlled commune, yeah.
Wow.
In 65, Synanon purchased a large parcel of land in Marin County that came to be called Tamales Bay. Here, they also established a research center and a school called the Academy, sort of like a college. At this point, there were around 1,400 people living in a Synanon facility and 5,500 participating in game clubs.
Wow.
Yeah, this is big news. Where the inclusion of squares, particularly in the residences, got weird was that the rules, originally designed to help drug addicts kick their habits, strict rules about responsibilities and comings and goings, were now being applied, as we said, to people who had no habit at all. Squares were following Synanon's codes as if they were drug addicts with no addictions to overcome.
So, like, what were they yelling at them about in those sessions?
Well, I mean, we've all got shit, right?
The way you walk is whack. Okay. The way you talk is whack. Your shoes are whack.
I mean, it's like, I don't know, Rob, you don't support people enough, or you don't, I don't know, something.
You still carry judgment for these addicts.
Yeah. Or, you raise your voice or something, yeah.
You chew too loud.
Start calling them wannabes.
Yeah. These lifestylers transitioned into full-time employees as the organization continued to accrue resources. So they started to run businesses. They started like a imprint business for like t-shirts and stuff. Like they did all these sort of gigs now. So that it went from this poor group that lived off donations to now they're starting to generate their own income. Significantly, as squares were being pressured into taking up residence as lifestylers, Synanon was also ending the process of graduation for narcotics addicts. The group's doctrine changed such that they no longer sought to rehabilitate people and send them out to thrive in the square world. Rather, Diederich concluded that most addicts who left Synanon ended up dead, and so began to keep them, arguing that they were safer inside than out.
We actually decided we liked free labor way too much. so you can't recover anymore. It's just not possible.
Maybe so.
Maybe run the t-shirt shop instead and like keep repenting, keep working on it, keep getting yelled at.
You might be right. That might be some part of the logic. I mean, I don't know that Dietrich would have ever admitted that to himself, but this stuff has happened. The businesses are starting to grow. The business of Synanon is growing, and I don't think it's true. The people, the researchers who worked on this historically, I mean, Yablonsky believed that people recovered, and he was very pro Synanon for that reason, and even subsequent research on Synanon suggests that people did graduate and they went on and did fine.
I will say,
so he was wrong in going against his own policy.
In cults, there's always a turning point when the leader goes against their own policy, when it switches. Heaven's Gate, it was, we are all going to ascend, and then his wife died, and he was like, actually, some people can like ascend sooner, so like we all need to die now. Like they'll do a 180 or like change their policies, go back on one of their core beliefs, and so it loses the initial like positive meaning and kind of just becomes a big power trip.
Yeah, we'll get back to some of that weirdness, I promise.
Oh yay.
Yeah, I think it'll get weird in that kind of way. Arguably hundreds of people successfully graduated from Synanon, so come on. After 1968, any rehabilitated addict who left the compound was treated as someone who had split or quit the program, an apostate.
They like shunned?
Yes, basically. Yep.
Ew.
Another trademark.
Right, like your MLMs, Nikki, right?
Yep, called trademark, getting exiled.
This did not stop people from splitting, just like people somehow managed to get out of Scientology. Many split anyway in 1970 when Dietrich banned smoking for all Synanon members. So this was a huge split.
Oh, that'd be a big drawback. I bet a lot of people are like, it's all I have left.
Are you still a smoker, Nikki?
I was until like 2 years ago. Now I just smoke weed.
What did you use anything to get off it?
Weed. I just started smoking more weed.
Anytime to replace the nicotine.
Yeah.
We don't recommend that here in Occult Confessions. Tobacco.
It's legal in Canada.
It's legal in Maryland. It's legal in Florida?
Nope. No, medicinal it is. When I was in Washington, you best believe it was
recreational.
A block from every place that I lived.
Back in your home state, it's recreational, man.
The rub and some weed.
Tobacco had been, as Nikki's saying, an important outlet for many members when they gave up narcotics cold turkey, because that was the only way you could do it in Synanon. Game meetings were known for the clouds of cigarette smoke that hung in the room. So not only are you yelling at people, but you're also choking on everybody's secondhand smoke. Dietrich's doctor had told him that if he kept up smoking, he wouldn't live long. And so he banned it for everyone in the whole organization.
Said if I can't do it, you can't do it.
I mean, honestly, they didn't understand secondhand smoke back then, but he would have died if his doctor was saying that and he just let everyone else keep smoking, he'd basically still be smoking.
That's true.
Valid.
So it was kind of worked out. But anyway, smoking was not something some residents were willing to part with because it's also highly addictive, and so they parted with Synanon. The researcher Ron Jansen estimated that roughly 95% of Synanon members eventually split with the commune, not necessarily over smoking, but for various issues over time.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of splitters. So it's not like 95% quit. I want to be very clear when the smoking ban happened, but a whole bunch of people did. But then as you add up over the whole organization's history, only 5% lingered. In addition to game sessions, Synanon also introduced reach sessions, oriented more towards philosophical integration. Participants would receive a single question like, why does water take the shape of a sphere? And then work to reach a conclusion in which everyone's perspective was equally well understood by everyone else in the group. It's a little bit like devising.
Oh.
Yes. Not so
yeah,
bad.
Okay.
It's weird.
I don't understand the self-help part of that.
I mean, because it's about the group dynamic. I think the purpose is all the group dynamic. But that's how I feel about it. So it seems like
less the topic.
Yeah, as opposed to, well, because you're not going to, you could just get a book and figure out why water takes the shape of a sphere. Like, you don't need to solve that problem. So then it's about the relationships. I mean, unlike I used theatrical devising, like the point is to create an interesting scene that people want to watch, right? As opposed to just the group dynamic is important in getting people to collaborate openly and effectively, but there's also this other goal. In this case, I think the collaboration is its own thing.
Just to bring everyone together and get on the same
about
page.
This water.
Yep.
So Synanon introduced the micro game, which is a form of the game played in 2 minutes at the start of a workday. We just hurry up, 2 minutes, yell at each other real quick.
That's just how I like to start my workday.
Okay.
Then there was the stew, which is the opposite, lasted at least 24 hours and put people together for the purposes of melding their views and their personalities. We would stew and we'd all become melded. The stew was first developed as a means to meld people who resisted Synanon's new direction with people who embraced it.
Racists?
Huh?
The racists? Because it got integrated, right? Or are we way past the integration at this point?
Way past the integration. I guess we're just talking about this. It's more about, Nikki, the lifestylers, the squares becoming lifestylers and then moving in. The commune direction that Synanon's taking. It's looking less and less like drug rehabilitation and more like a commune that also rehabilitates some drug addicts.
Just kind of happenstancely.
I mean, it's just a thing we started doing and we don't see any reason to quit.
We're not letting them graduate anymore, though. But we'll still, make you better. Just not... You're never going to, recover.
Functioning, but functioning for our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. That's sort of that idea. The trip may have been... the most cult-like... Okay, one more thing I got to introduce to you. This is the trip. It may have been the most cult-like of the new rituals of Synanon's new iteration. Participants stripped down to underwear and socks, put on white robes, spent 2 to 3 days, sleep-deprived days, in intense gaming, trips to the sauna, excavation of childhood traumas, and just walks. Just going on a walk.
To be fair, that kind of sounds like my everyday life.
What?
2 to 3 sleep-deprived days. I'm always
in
gaming.
Your white robe.
I do go to the sauna.
The sauna.
I can't say that word, apparently. Get
your robe on.
Work through some childhood traumas and go on a little walk.
Always.
Now, Jake, does this happen? Trips often incorporated the Ouija board, operated by robed witches.
Okay, I love a robed witch, but I will say, call me superstitious. I will never touch a Ouija board. I don't care. I don't care if it's a literal just board game. I don't care. Because you know what? What if it's not? That's not a chance I'm willing to take. I don't care if it... Call me suspicious. Call me crazy. I'm never touching one of those. Don't care.
The mediums tend to agree with you there. Work was organized into a cube with members working 14 days. Okay, so now moving off the trip. Now, work itself at the commune spaces was organized into a cube with members working 14 days on and then 14 days off for mental and physical growth. So you got 14 days for the commune, 14 days for you, but it wasn't like you can do whatever you want. You had to come up with these activities because you got to get better.
Oh. Okay.
Many of these new directions came down from Dietrich, who had been gamed regularly by other members in the early days of Synanon, but was gamed less and less as time passed.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's important.
Seen as more of a ideal than someone that you're criticizing openly.
He's letting people call him out on his shit, and then he's not anymore, and that's going to affect the health of the organization.
There was that key point from earlier on that you said that they could talk back, but they still had to conform.
Right. His wife Betty had gamed him right up until her death in 1977, because that's your wife.
Yeah, right, she did.
On her deathbed, she's trashing
My wife
him.
games me. I mean, come on. When Betty
You're
was diagnosed,
die right now, really?
When Betty was diagnosed with diabetes, Dietrich banned the eating of processed sugar across all of Synanon's communes. Then, when she died of lung cancer... Oh, what?
Sorry, I was going to say she can't get secondhand diabetes. Don't take away everyone else's sugar.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, but it looks like the smoking thing, right?
See, the smoking thing, maybe I would have quit. Take away my sugar for my coffee. I am God.
It's getting more and more health nutty. So when Betty died of lung cancer and Dietrich remarried, he decided that all Synanon couples... Here it comes, should change partners.
Uh-oh, wife swap.
What in the... Oh...
Early 2000s
Oh my
TV
gosh,
show.
yes.
But way earlier than that. So he loses his
Inspiration
wife.
for a wife
He
swap?
has to... I mean, his idea is that after his wife dies, he remarries fairly quickly, like within a year, maybe even much shorter than that. And he's like, oh, this was good. I like this new wife thing. Everybody should have this.
Was it someone also in the commune?
I want to give a quick side note on Betty's passing. Even though the organization had begun to scandalize the public by this point, the success of Synanon I allowed the group to maintain a veneer of respectability, and Betty's passing really demonstrates this. When she died, Synanon received condolences from Jimmy and Rosalind Carter.
Mm.
And the mayor of Los Angeles proclaimed it Betty Dieterich Day.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so they were... Yeah, they're freaky and they're on the outside, but they're also very much connected politically and on the inside, and they're respected for the drug rehabilitation work they've done.
That's a very dangerous background for a cult to have behind them.
Yeah.
The air of respectability makes it more dangerous, absolutely.
He did a good thing. Yeah.
Well, it's just like Jim Jones. He was big on integration, on racial integration in his church. It was like the only church that would allow people of all races to like intermingle. And that's great. We all know what happened though. Right. So things can start out good, and that gives them some weight and some power to go so wrong.
So let's get back to wife swapping, shall we?
Yes,
the
please.
Strange thing about Chuck's decision to have everyone swap wives was that Synanon was actually fairly conservative about sex. It forbid promiscuity, so you couldn't have more than one partner. It forbid adultery, and sex before the age of, you're both going to faint, 18.
That's like...
Whoa.
It's like not the worst thing out of all of those.
Practically middle-aged. For your
your life's over at that point.
That's a woman's sexual peak is 18, but a man, he's like 5 years in. His sexual peak is behind him. For your rematch, you could pair with someone you already shared a mutual attraction with, or a matchmaker would find you a suitable partners. So you could be like,
that's kind of cute.
Oh, I always thought Martha was kind of hot. Huh? Oh, too bad.
You're just sneaking around behind your new partner's back to hook up with your actual wife.
I think I imagine it's like, it's that couple that you go out with on weekends and you're like, yeah.
They always thought about swinging.
Yeah,
there's that lingering thought. You know what? Maybe that upside down pineapple isn't such a bad.
But if all your
Sorry.
But you weren't allowed to swing, so now you get your chance. But you're sort of, you can't have sex with your wife ever again.
Is it like a?
It's one swing.
Man. Is it like a one-time pass?
It's a door that doesn't really swing. It swings one way. But then if you didn't have anybody, then they would find you somebody. Anyhow, around 460 couples participated in the experiment, and then 300 people said, "Screw this, I'm out of here."
I want my wife
After
back.
the wife swap?
Before the wife swap.
Oh,
before.
He decrees that we shall swap wives. 460 couples say
it was mandatory.
Yes, you're going to have to do this.
Whoa!
So that's 920 people say, "Okay, I'll do it," and then 300 are like, "No, bye bye."
I like the wife I have, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So now
you can't have her.
Let me make some logical sense of this. Family in a nuclear sense was actually not particularly privileged. So even though the sexual politics were kind of conservative, family itself wasn't a big deal in Synanon II. Perhaps owing to the conflicted relationships addicts in Synanon I often had with their parents. Think about that. Why should we care about the family when that nuclear family structure failed me? Dad, was never home.
The daddy
Mom
issues are the
beat me,
reasons that I have this addiction.
Right.
Why do I want to go reconnect with my dad?
Mom and dad were alcoholics, whatever.
Why would they start setting up that of trying to reconnect mothers with their kids?
Yeah, what happened to that? That was cute.
If this is becoming like a...
I view it more as separating mom from her kids, and she has to earn the kid back.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Because mom's letting the kids down. And so at Synanon, your relationship with your children is not my relationship with my children. It was inspired by the Israeli kibbutz, the way they arranged family. Children were separated from their parents beginning at the age of 6 months and lived in separate buildings. They lived sometimes even on separate sites. You could be in like Southern California and I'm in San Francisco. Children, Children called their parents by their first names. My kids actually attempt that too. My daughter loves to just mix that in.
Throw you off.
Robert.
Sometimes I'm all right with it because I do let my students call me by my first name. So like that part of me is like, yeah, whatever, call me Rob. But then
how weird is that your students sometimes call you dad instead?
That happens less these days, Jake. But yes,
I've been gone for too long.
Your generation was all my children, my adopted children. Yeah, but anyway, it is a weird moment. But yeah, in Synanon, you were calling everybody by their first name. And you were taught in a school with a low student-to-teacher ratio, so that's good. But the instructors had very little formal academic training.
But what were you being taught?
Following the Montessori model, children were encouraged to begin undertaking at least one authentic work activity at the age of 3.
Jesus.
Well, I mean, I gotta say with my son in particular, like the impetus to do something useful is strong. Like he really wants to my daughter she was not so into that when she was 2 or 3, but now like she wants to like plant something or pull something, the gardening she really wants to participate in. And for Everett, it's every damn thing. Like he wants to do everything himself and he wants to help, pour the milk into the eggs and stir the eggs. And so I do think there's something to this on a healthy way, but I guess Nikki, you're thinking about this as like
the free labor.
Lust for labor. Yeah.
The free labor of it all.
This was also the age when children were first introduced to the game. The age is 3 again. At 3, children start playing.
Roasting a little baby 3-year-old.
Giving haircuts to each other.
Your thighs are too chubby. Like what? Like what are you criticizing at that point? You only have 3 teeth. Like
for children, the game was often an emotionally turbulent experience, although there was, as you can imagine, there were reportedly less conflicts and crying outside of the game, though, so they did manage to get kids to compartmentalize pretty well and do all their yelling in the game.
Well, yeah, they're training them so young that's, like, people who come in with their own fully formed mind, that's harder for them because that's not what you do in everyday life, but they're teaching these kids, like, this is what you do in everyday life. Yeah. At 3, of course, they don't know anything else.
Jansen reports that 70s Synanon children had a generally more positive experience with the game than the 80s kids. Probably because the 80s kids didn't get to have micro machines. But that's... Anyway. So, love those micro machines. In a strange but predictable turn, in 1974, the Synanon Foundation asked the United States Internal Revenue Service to formally recognize it as a church. Already crossed the line, Nikki, but this would be another place to put it. It's another Rubicon. The changes in the organization had led outsiders to accuse Synanon of not working in the public interest, which would make it ineligible for tax-exempt status. But if it were a religion, that would assure its status by other means. So it's not doing the drug rehabilitation so consistently anymore. So they're like, oof, how do we, we've got to do something about this tax exempt. So we'll be a religion because you don't have to rehabilitate drug addicts if you're a church.
No, then you can just go straight to demeaning them and making them feel, just play the game.
You can do whatever you want. Yeah. It would also
to be judged.
Synanon's, the game becomes a religious ritual, which exempts them from scrutiny by government social service authorities. So bear in mind, parole officers and, human services are putting people in Synanon with the expectation that they will, cure people or at least improve their circumstances. So they have some scrutiny and oversight because, they're putting money in, they're putting patients in, but that is not the case if it's a church. And if it's a religious exercise and not a therapeutic exercise.
Right.
Howard Garfield, one of Synanon's lawyers, drafted the document detailing the organization's doctrines, which took most of their practices and simply couched them in religious terms. The game, for example, became more than a search for personal and interpersonal truth, but rather now an attempt to commune with God. Synanon practices were more important than any system of belief, and Dietrich actually continued to regard himself as a Catholic the whole time. In fact, he encouraged members to maintain their religious affiliations. However, the commune's emphasis on containing people to the community often precluded attendance at outside religious services. So you could say you were a Pentecostal, you just couldn't go to Pentecostal church.
It's like you could speak your mind, you just don't get to do anything about it. It don't matter.
Well, and you can believe whatever you want about Jesus or Buddha or whatever, but you're not going to go.
But you're going to believe it here.
You got to stay here, yeah. You could have your own service in your room or whatever. In terms of public relations, the transition to the Church of Synanon did not go over well with the outsider public, with conservative Christians in particular labeling the group, for some of the first time, a harmful cult.
No.
In winter of 75, a conversation about an inconvenient beam at the food processing center in Tamales Bay. I'm not going to get into the details of this because it's boring and weird, but there's a beam that's in the wrong place at the food processing center. It's sort of in the way. And Dietrich says that whoever hired the idiots who installed the beam should have his head shaved. And a male member took Dietrich's suggestion and shaved his head. And then hundreds more also shaved their heads, including Chuck Dietrich.
Oh, I've seen pictures.
He said it.
In total, 500 women and 800 men ended up shaving their heads. And Dietrich,
I've seen these pictures.
After the fact, considered a great display of integration. But it all happened more or less by chance. So, as Nikki's saying, the pictures, it looks like Chuck Dietrich has said, "You all must shave your heads. I am your master."
Oh, totally. That's what I thought.
Instead, he made this offhanded joke, and a member, either hoping to please him or just sort of inspired by the joke, was like, "Okay, I'll just do it." And then all these other guys are like, that looks badass. We're all going to do it too. We're so committed to this place.
And now it's like such an iconic imagery for this group. That's so funny.
Them all sitting in like the chairs and stuff, just shaving their heads.
So 800, what did I say? 800 men and 500 women. It all happened by chance because of an offhand comment about an offhanded beam. That's all.
It's just like the power that one person can have over that. Just
and the danger.
That wasn't even like a sincere thing.
Yeah, careful what you say when you have that much power over people.
In the mid-1970s, the head shaving, as Nikki's saying, much like the request to become a religion, did not sit well with the public. Yet again, the utopian drug treatment commune was looking an awful lot like a dystopian cult.
Like, hey, everyone's shaving their heads now. This is not a good look for us.
Not sure how this is fixing their addiction there, Chuck.
We didn't think this through. Oh, we didn't think this through. We all look insane now.
Yeah, it was like the worst possible time to be doing all this.
It was a really bad look for them.
The cult panic is everywhere, right? The Jonestown and stuff, like everyone is worried about cults. And he's like, oops, we all shaved our heads.
No, we're just a church. Don't worry.
You can't escape the allegations.
My bad. But that, friends, is when the spankings started.
And not in like a fun way. Like not in a fun way.
The first
I didn't think so.
Synanon had been generally averse to violence, but Synanon II was far less genteel, particularly in its treatment of Synanon's children. According to Jansen, Dietrich's approval for the use of violence began with an incident in which Dietrich threw a drink on someone he was disagreeing with. You're not really supposed to do that. You're supposed to use your words, as we tell our kids. Theoretically, the game made it so that these sorts of physical responses weren't necessary, but now they became a part of the culture. Synanon sought out weapons permits for its members and developed a weapons cache of Colt 45s and shotguns, not for them to use on each other, but to protect the compounds from the outside world.
I really did think it would come to people trading blows. Like, I really thought the game was going to end up being them just, like, beating the shit out of each other. Yeah. No. It's a duel.
It's a lot like the head shaving thing in my mind. He was just having this game session with this guy, and he got his anger up too much, and he threw a drink on him. But rather than walk it back, he's like,
he has to commit to it now. Do you think it's like if he had a moment, like for both of those, that he's like, well, I did this, so I have to follow through, or else these people might not follow through.
If he was in a position to be gamed, he could have been gamed then, and it could have been corrected.
Yeah.
We're a non-violent group. What are you doing, man? And he's like, mea culpa. But he can't. He can't admit fault.
At this point, everyone's just like, we're all throwing drinks.
He doesn't want to admit fault. Synanon became less and less child-friendly as time passed. Beginning in 1976, Dietrich called for members to be childless, to better devote themselves to caring for others through the organization, because they are still doing that. Synanon encouraged women to have abortions, and in 1977, at a mass clipping party, 250 men received vasectomies.
They all did. Oh my
I'm going to make this worse. Most members in 77 were in their early 20s.
That's devastating, because you're not thinking clearly with a decision like that when you're being influenced. They obviously are going to regret that. Well, probably. Oh my God.
Dietrich himself did not participate.
That mother... Oh, I hate. It's like Jim Jones poisoning everyone and then getting himself shot. Like a little bitch who couldn't take what they're giving. Oh, I hate it.
The culmination of the turn toward violence happened when 2 Synanon members dropped a rattlesnake in a man's mailbox that nearly killed him on the 10th of October, 1978. You ready for this story?
That's a little bit more than throwing a drink. My goodness.
This is, more than anything else, the iconic Synanon story. If you know anything about Synanon, I guess maybe you know the shaved heads and you know this story. So here it goes. The man's name who received the snake in his mailbox was Paul Morantz, and he was a lawyer from Pacific Palisades outside Los Angeles. He'd been representing a woman who had been referred to Synanon by a Venice Beach treatment clinic and was held at Synanon for 90 days, during which time she claimed she had been involuntarily imprisoned, and her husband claimed he had no access to her. Dietrich left for Europe during the trial, and the judge ultimately ordered Synanon to pay $300,000 to the plaintiff.
That's a hefty price tag.
Hefty price tag. These guys were in court not infrequently, not always for, often, I actually think not often for issues like this, because most people were more or less voluntarily at the Synanon facilities, but issues dealing with custody, child custody, because you could be in Synanon and you could be separated from your children, and then you could leave Synanon, have to get your child back, or you leave but your wife doesn't leave and your child is still in Synanon, and your wife is being moved around and your child's being moved around. This landed Synanon in court, I think, more than once. And Morantz was often prosecuting them. So it wasn't just this case, I don't think. 2 Synanon members, Lance Kenton, who had been with the organization since he was 10 years old and was actually the first one to sign up for a vasectomy, and Joe Musico, who was a Vietnam War veteran recovering from heroin addiction. They were picked out of a lineup. So these are the 2 guys that dropped the snake in the box. Witnesses
just
claimed...
the most brainwashed.
They saw the men around Morantz's house, where evidence suggested that they had dropped a rattlesnake with the rattles removed into the mailbox. So you got to take the rattles off, or you're going to get suspicious when you walk up to your mailbox and it's going... Yeah.
That's weird.
It's my maracas.
Mailboxes don't make that sound.
My maracas have arrived and they're playing themselves.
Interesting.
Morantz, my Mexican jumping beans are here. When Morantz went to get his mail, he was bitten, and medical professionals required, get this, 18 vials of antivenom to keep him alive.
Wow.
Yeah. So he survived. But boy, oh boy.
It wasn't easy.
Attacked a lawyer with a rattlesnake. Yeah.
Well, they were going after the one who's been defending the people that have left.
Yeah.
That's some ancient Egyptian snake in a box.
Yes, yeah. The same year as the rattlesnake attempted murder, Synanon lifted the ban on alcohol. Let me say that again. Lifted the ban on alcohol.
So, like...
It really goes their separation from AA.
Yeah, they came full circle there. Intentionally or unintentionally, this distanced the group from its recovery roots. Dietrich's doctor had suggested to him that a glass of wine at dinner might be good for his health, and he quickly descended back into full-on alcoholism, complete with a change in policy across the organization.
That's...
Yeah.
So he just, like, went to his group and he was like, we'll give it up, everybody get drunk, I don't care.
The doctor said I could have some wine, so y'all can drink too now.
Let's party!
You're recovering from serious drug addiction, but go ahead, have a drink.
To a bunch of alcoholics.
Highly addictive personalities,
Makes sense. Yeah.
Between the partner switching and ban on smoking and head shaving and return to violence, Synanon went from 1,300 members in 1977 to just under 1,000 in 1978.
In just a year, they lost that many.
By 82,
wow,
1982, so 4 more years, there were 700 members, and they all relocated to Synanon site in rural Badger. So they used to have all these different sites, and now all of them have congregated in a single site by 82. Over the next 6 years, that number would dwindle again by half. In 1980, Kenton and Musico were sentenced to a year of prison time for their involvement in the rattlesnake incident. They're lucky he didn't die.
Yeah.
It was a year. Dietrich was fined $5,000, put on probation in order to remove himself from the management of Synanon. Same case. Dietrich was, according to some reports, drinking a half-gallon of Chivas Regal whiskey every day. At this point, he began to suffer from strokes, and so not your favorite. He began to
we'll tip that off.
He's getting picky here. He began to suffer from strokes as well as nervous breakdowns. Aerobics were dropped from the daily routine. Members started eating sugar again. Some men reversed their vasectomies and started engendering babies with their wives. The rules, which had long been fairly arbitrary, were now, as I'm saying, increasingly irrelevant.
He went back on all of them. That's all the...
Yeah. All fell apart.
All the rules.
I mean, I don't know if he went back on them so much as he just lost control of the group.
It sounds like he also kind of personally gave up on those.
Yeah.
Because, like, the doctor was like, wine's good for you. He's like, okay, screw it, wine's good for me. And, okay, you guys can do this. Or, yeah, like, he was getting swayed, too, in his...
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're talking about, Nikki, with that halo that the narcotics recovery provided the organization, that shattered with the alcohol thing. I mean, the organization was getting weirder and weirder and weirder, but they could always claim that weirdness had something to do with recovery. But then with the alcohol thing, it's just over.
Lost all the credit. That just makes no sense to anybody. It's... Yeah.
They lost their property tax exemption, and then they lost their tax-exempt status after the government discovered that millions of dollars had been transferred to Dietrich and his family from the foundation. This is L. Ron Hubbard stuff, right? The IRS demanded that Synanon pay $17 million in back taxes, and this basically bankrupt the organization, which formally closed in 1991. So there you go, 58-ish to 91. Wow. Amazingly, Dietrich lived until 1997, long after Synanon ceased to be, and he died at the age of 83.
Still drinking?
Yeah, it was a cardiac problem that got him. Yeah, a cardiorespiratory issue. But
I'm surprised it took that long.
Yeah, when you could think about the man's life. I mean, power maybe keeps you living. I can name a few people in the U.S. here who power seems to be keeping alive.
Seriously,
topical, very topical. Very just the other day.
Anyhow, although the formal organization called Synanon does not exist anymore, its philosophy lives on. This is my postscript, guys. We're getting to the end of today's episode. A group inspired by Synanon I and perhaps a little bit by Synanon II continues in the work of teen rehabilitation to this day. I'm speaking of CEDU, that's CEDU, Educational Services. This group was founded by Mel Wasserman, who was a former Synanon member going back to 1967. So there's a direct link there.
And that was a better time for the group, right?
It's Synanon I, yeah.
That was a better time.
That's still Synanon I. However, CDU is a controversial organization. There's actually no clear line on what it means. It's an acronym, CEDU. They're all capitalized, but it's an uncertain acronym, so they won't tell you what the letters stand for. And some people have theorized that the letters stand for C. Charles E. Dederich University, CEDU.
I mean, if it fits.
Yeah.
So CEDU included the game as well as trips and the works of Emerson and Thoreau into its programming. Remember those weird white robe trips? Those are part of CEDU stuff. Patients stayed...
A weird thing to hold on to.
Sometimes for over 2 years of a tough love program. They signed a contract that dictated they were not allowed to have sex, there was no drugs, there was no violence, and stipulated details of dress and hair. And if they violated the contract, they were sent to a 6-week boot camp in Ruby Ridge, Idaho, site of the Ruby Ridge Massacre. So Ruby Ridge is where all the conspiracy theorists live.
I was just going to say that this sounded like one of those boot camps. But no. This is the before, and then if you're bad, you get the boot camp.
The boot camp is the threat. We will send you.
You go to the ranch.
This sounded like the ranch already.
So here's some of the people who participated in a CEDU program. Adam Eget, Rachel Yucatel, the MLM Herbalife founder Mark Hughes, and Paris Hilton are all CEDU.
Yes.
I was going to say, it sounds like one of those places for troubled kids.
She's speaking out now, like, against all of these things, because she's like, this is harmful to teenagers. And as someone who has been through it.
Yeah, it's a deeply immersive and I think intentionally traumatizing program.
It is, and with the people that could be in charge, with that kind of power, like I said, there's different ways people take it, and if you have control over a large group of underage influential people who are, at a disadvantage, it's a recipe for disaster.
And Synanon had also taken in kids at a certain point. They took in street youth, people who were having children, teenagers,
somehow just extra manipulative, because they're like not even fully formed people yet to be brainwashed. You're brainwashing them, and like they don't even have a fair chance to fight it, really.
Controversial throughout its existence, CEDU continues to operate under the auspices of the Idaho Educational Services. So Synanon gone but not forgotten. And that's all I have to say. And boy, we've been talking a while about Synanon. Final thoughts, lady and gentlemen.
Not great.
Wow.
Well, okay. Synanon I. What do we think?
Good intended.
Not bad for what it wanted to do. Some of the things, because the yelling was part of that.
But if we're thinking adult drug addicts, right, who can't kick this habit and it works for them.
I say as long as it was like adults who were all consenting to criticizing each other, that could be useful.
I think the logic is about, what do you call it? Enabling. You don't enable, right? If you're calling people out and you're being honest with them. You enable if you let them hold on to their delusions. And
that can be a big problem in a lot of people's lives, or the people around them don't notice or just aren't bothered with it. And then it is more okay in your head because no one's outright criticizing you for it. So I could see how that could be helpful. I could see how that could be helpful. You'll lose me with all the several lines I drew.
Right. So Synanon II. We also have to remember that rehab is not. Rehab isn't great, right? There's a lot of people who go to rehab and
no.
Yes, there's a lot of relapsing.
It's intense.
So maybe Dederich was onto something. Who knows? In Synanon I, but then it got weird.
It got so lost.
It's like the ones speaking out that were saying it did work for them prior to all of the weird going on started to occur.
It's the weird, I think for me, it's all around the squares. When the squares start, for some reason,
squares
it's all about squares. When they're living on the commune, they shouldn't be. Like, that's odd. That's not what the commune's for. So that's weird. And then when we're not graduating people to go back to living with everybody else,
the intention shifts from wanting to help people to just wanting to maintain the power that you've accumulated.
The community
and
becomes
the
what it's all about.
businesses and the community you have kind of control over, and like maybe the businesses that are growing from it, and the community, you don't want to lose these people. So now you're like, actually, you can't. Yeah, the intention changed. It was to help people, and then I think it became more about the relevance and the group and stuff.
I could see a positive to the squares prior to them just coming in to like sit in on the sessions, and like the ones who are being like rehabilitated, like seeing these more like positive influences. But even like in AA or something, it's your sponsors are people who have been through what you've been through too, and they're on the flip side. So you can have a visual or role model of someone who has like worked past it or is still like going through it, but they're like making their way. I guess that it's just, they definitely should have moved in though. That's a clear, you're crossing the line at that point.
So what do you think, Nikki? I mean, where addiction issues, how do we kick them?
Oh, you gotta figure out why you have him. He's right about that, because what he was wrong about though was that he almost became the program almost became people's new addiction, and that's something you have to be really careful of, because that's the easiest way to get rid of an addiction, switch it. And it doesn't even have to be like an addictive substance. You could get addicted to anything. You can get addicted to a person. You can get addicted to a hobby. You can get addicted to exercise. You can get addicted to dieting. Like, there's just so many things that if you have the mindset of an addict, there is something that needs to be addressed, or you will keep shifting the addiction onto something. For right now, coffee, weed, I need those. You take them away, I'd get angry, I get sad. I need to work on that, and I know it. But that's what you have to address. You can't just quit something cold turkey and think, okay, I'm done that now, and it's over, and it's done. Because it's not. You're going to jump to the next thing. And then when you quit that thing, there's going to be something else, right, to latch onto.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. Well, you heard it here, folks. Any other thoughts, you two? That's good. We can call it quits. I hereby adjourn and declare closed this meeting of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors until such a time as we get together and do it again. This was Jake Wheatley and Nikki Hiller-Anderson joining us today for this conversation. Friends,
it was a good time.
Don't do drugs unless it's weed and it's legal where you are.
Don't fall for cults.
We want to thank Sheila Weiwei and Brandon Walls for contributing a voice today. My name is Dr. Rob C. Thompson. Done with signing on. Moving on to what, you ask? I believe we're talking Norwegian black metal with Mims next episode. Yes, that is right up many of your alleys. Don't even try to kid me, Occult Confessions listeners. And I look forward to speaking with you again here on Occult Confessions.